The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and civilizations. Among them, the Galactic Union stood as a beacon of order and progress. Its fleets were unmatched, its technology unparalleled. But even the Union had its secrets, secrets buried in the darkest corners of space, where no one dared to venture. It was in one such forgotten corner that the story began. A small scavenger ship, piloted by a lone human named Jack, drifted through the debris field of an ancient battle. The wreckage was old, centuries perhaps, and the scanners on Jack's ship barely registered anything of value. But Jack was desperate. Fuel was low, credits were scarce, and the Union's taxes were due. He needed a miracle, or at least a decent haul of scrap metal. As his ship's thrusters hummed softly, Jack's eyes scanned the radar. A faint blip appeared on the edge of the screen. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He adjusted the ship's course, maneuvering carefully through the twisted metal carcasses of long-forgotten warships. The blip grew stronger as he approached. Soon, the outline of a massive vessel came into view. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The ship was ancient, its hull covered in strange, angular designs that seemed to shimmer faintly in the starlight. It was enormous, easily the size of a Union battleship, but it bore no markings or insignias. It was as if the ship had been erased from history. Jack's heart raced. This was no ordinary wreck. This was something else entirely. He brought his ship closer, docking carefully with the ancient vessel. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dark, silent interior. Jack grabbed his flashlight and stepped inside, his boots echoing softly in the empty corridors. The ship was eerily quiet, as if it had been waiting for him. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Jack's flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he saw movement in the shadows. He shook his head, dismissing it as his imagination. As he ventured deeper into the ship, he found a control room. The consoles were covered in dust, but the screens flickered to life as he approached. Strange symbols scrolled across the displays, and Jack realized with a start that the ship's systems were still active. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out and touched one of the consoles. The symbols shifted, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. But as he watched, the words changed, morphing into something he could understand. "Welcome, Captain," the screen read. Jack froze. Captain? He wasn't a captain. He was just a scavenger, a nobody. But before he could react, the ship shuddered. The engines roared to life, and the ancient vessel began to move. Panic surged through Jack as he stumbled back to his ship. But it was too late. The docking clamps had locked in place. And his small scavenger vessel was now tethered to the massive warship. Outside, the stars blurred as the ship jumped into hyperspace. Jack was trapped, hurtling through space on a ship that shouldn't exist, toward a destination he didn't know. And somewhere, deep within the ship, something stirred. The hyperspace jump was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced. The stars stretched into long, glowing lines, and the ship's ancient engines hummed with a power that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. He clung to the console in the control room, his mind racing. Where was this ship taking him? And why had it called him Captain? The jump ended as suddenly as it had begun. The stars returned to their normal positions, and the ship slowed to a halt. Jack's eyes widened as he looked out the viewport. They had arrived at a massive space station, its structure looming like a dark fortress against the backdrop of a dying star. The station was ancient, its surface pockmarked with scars from countless battles. It was clear that no one had set foot here in centuries. The ship's systems activated again, and a holographic map appeared in front of Jack. A blinking dot marked a location deep within the station. The ship seemed to be guiding him there. Jack hesitated. He didn't trust this ancient vessel or its mysterious systems, but he had no choice. His scavenger ship was still locked in place, and he couldn't risk trying to disconnect it without knowing more. Grabbing his tools and a portable scanner, Jack made his way to the airlock. The station's docking bay was eerily silent, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of rust. His footsteps echoed as he stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The station's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, all filled with the remnants of a long-forgotten civilization. Jack followed the map, his scanner picking up faint energy readings from the direction of the blinking dot. As he walked, he noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols similar to those on the ship. They seemed to glow faintly as he passed, as if reacting to his presence. Finally, he reached a large, circular chamber. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on top of it rested a small, glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a soft, golden light, and as Jack approached, he felt a strange warmth emanating from it. The scanner in his hand beeped furiously. The energy readings were off the charts. Whatever this orb was, it was the source of the ship's power, and perhaps the reason it had been hidden away for so long. Jack reached out, his fingers brushing against the orb. Instantly, a surge of energy shot through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, visions of battles fought long ago, of a ship that had once been the pride of a mighty civilization, and of a weapon so powerful it could annihilate entire fleets. The visions faded, and Jack stumbled back, gasping for breath. The orb's glow intensified, and the symbols on the walls of the chamber began to shine brightly. A voice echoed in his mind, deep and resonant. "The weapon is yours to command," it said. "But beware. The enemy still lives." Before Jack could process what had happened, the station shook violently. Alarms blared, and the scanner in his hand detected incoming ships. A lot of them. Jack's heart sank as he realized the truth. The enemy the voice had warned him about, they were here. And they were coming for the ship. The station trembled as the enemy ships approached. Jack's scanner showed dozens of vessels closing in, their signatures unlike anything he had seen before. They were sleek, angular, and radiated a cold, menacing energy. The ancient ship's systems flared to life, projecting a holographic display of the incoming fleet. Jack's mind raced. He was no soldier, no hero. He was just a scavenger, a man who survived by picking through the bones of the galaxy's forgotten past. But now, he was trapped on an ancient warship with a weapon of unimaginable power, and an enemy fleet was bearing down on him. The voice in his mind spoke again, calm but urgent. "Return to the ship. You must defend it." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the glowing orb, its warmth seeping into his hands, and sprinted back through the station's corridors. The walls seemed to shift around him, the symbols glowing brighter as if guiding his way. By the time he reached the docking bay, the enemy ships were almost upon the station. He leaped into the ancient ship's airlock, the orb still clutched tightly in his hands. The moment he stepped inside, the ship's systems activated. The control room lit up, and the holographic displays showed the enemy fleet in vivid detail. Jack placed the orb on the central console, and the ship seemed to come alive. The engines roared, and the ship detached from the station with a smooth, practiced motion. Jack stumbled into the captain's chair, his hands gripping the armrests as the ship accelerated. The enemy fleet was now visible through the viewport, their weapons charging. "What do I do?" Jack muttered, more to himself than to the ship. The orb pulsed, and the ship's voice echoed in his mind. "Activate the weapon." A holographic interface appeared in front of Jack, showing a complex array of controls. He hesitated, his hands hovering over the glowing symbols. He had no idea what he was doing, but the enemy ships were closing in fast. The lead enemy vessel fired a massive energy blast, and the ancient ship's shields flared as it absorbed the impact. The force of the blast shook the ship, and Jack nearly fell out of the chair. "Activate the weapon," the voice urged again, more forcefully this time. Jack took a deep breath and pressed the largest symbol on the interface. The ship shuddered, and a low hum filled the air. Outside, a ring of light began to form around the ship's hull, growing brighter with each passing second. The enemy fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, but the ancient ship's shields held firm. The ring of light expanded, and Jack felt a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced. Then, with a deafening roar, the weapon fired. A beam of pure energy shot out from the ship, cutting through the enemy fleet like a blade through paper. The lead vessel disintegrated instantly, followed by the others as the beam swept across them. In moments, the entire fleet was reduced to nothing but glowing debris. Jack stared in stunned silence, his hands trembling. The weapon's power was beyond anything he could have imagined. But as the adrenaline faded, a chilling thought crept into his mind. If this ship and its weapon were so powerful, why had they been hidden away? And who, or what, were the enemies that still sought it? The silence that followed the destruction of the enemy fleet was deafening. Jack sat in the captain's chair, his hands still gripping the armrests, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The ancient ship's systems hummed softly, the glowing orb on the console pulsing gently as if to reassure him. But Jack felt no reassurance. The weapon's power was terrifying, and the ease with which it had annihilated the enemy fleet left him uneasy. Who were those ships? Why had they attacked? And why had the voice in his mind called them the enemy? The ship's holographic display flickered, showing a star map. A new destination was marked, a distant system on the edge of Union space. The ship's voice spoke again, calm but insistent. We must go. The enemy will send more. Jack frowned. Who are they? And why are they after this ship? The voice hesitated, as if choosing its words carefully. They are the remnants of a war long forgotten. They seek the weapon to finish what they started. What war? Jack asked, his voice rising. What are you talking about? The orb pulsed, and another wave of visions flooded Jack's mind. He saw a galaxy engulfed in flames, civilizations crumbling under the weight of an endless conflict. He saw the ancient ship, its weapon firing again and again, turning the tide of battle. And he saw the enemy, a race of beings shrouded in shadow, their eyes glowing with hatred. The visions ended, and Jack slumped back in the chair, his breath coming in short gasps. The weight of what he had seen pressed down on him. This ship wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a weapon of mass destruction, a tool of war that had been hidden away for a reason. Why me? Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did you choose me? The orb's glow softened. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. But you are here now, and the galaxy needs you. Jack shook his head. I'm not a hero. I'm just a scavenger. I can't do this. The ship's voice grew firm. You have no choice. The enemy will not stop until the weapon is theirs. If they succeed, the galaxy will burn. Jack clenched his fists, frustration and fear warring within him. He didn't want this responsibility. He didn't want to be the one to decide the fate of the galaxy. But deep down, he knew the ship was right. He couldn't run away. Not now. Fine, he said finally. But you're going to have to help me. I don't know how to fly this thing, let alone fight a war. The orb pulsed, and the ship's systems whirred to life. I will guide you. But the decisions must be yours. Jack took a deep breath and nodded. All right. Let's go. The ship's engines roared, and they jumped into hyperspace, leaving the debris of the enemy fleet behind. As the stars blurred around him, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far bigger than himself. And he was right. The journey to the marked system was tense. Jack spent hours in the control room, studying the ship's systems and trying to make sense of the holographic displays. The orb guided him, its soft pulses and the ship's voice providing instructions, but Jack still felt out of his depth. He was no pilot, no tactician. He was just a man trying to survive. As they neared their destination, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. The system ahead was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. A massive nebula swirled in the distance, its colors shifting from deep purple to fiery orange. At its center was a single planet, its surface covered in towering structures that glowed faintly in the starlight. The ship's voice spoke. "This is the last outpost of the ones who built me. Here, you will find answers." Jack frowned. Answers to what? Who built this ship? And why did they hide it? The orb pulsed, and the ship's voice grew somber. They were the first. The ones who sought to unite the galaxy. But their enemies were too many, and their war too costly. In the end, they chose to hide their greatest weapon, hoping it would never be needed again. Jack stared at the planet, his mind racing. And now it's needed again. Yes, the voice replied. The enemy has returned, and they will not stop until they have destroyed all that remains of the ones who built me. Jack clenched his fists. Then why didn't they just destroy this ship? Why leave it hidden where someone like me could find it? The orb's glow dimmed slightly. Because they believed in hope. They believed that one day, someone would rise to defend the galaxy once more. Jack shook his head. They put a lot of faith in strangers. The ship's voice softened. They put their faith in you. Jack didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. The weight of the responsibility was crushing, but he couldn't turn away. Not now. As the ship approached the planet, a signal came through on the comms. It was faint, barely audible, but Jack recognized it as a distress call. "This is Outpost Alpha," a voice crackled. "We are under attack." "Repeat, we are under attack. If anyone can hear this, we need help." Jack's heart sank. The enemy had beaten them here. The ship's voice grew urgent. "We must act quickly. If the outpost falls, the enemy will gain access to its archives. They cannot be allowed to have that knowledge." Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. "All right. Let's go." The ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, its shields flaring as it entered the turbulent skies. Below, the outpost was under siege. Enemy ships swarmed the area, their weapons firing relentlessly at the towering structures. Fires raged across the surface, and Jack could see small figures running for cover. The ship's weapons activated, targeting the enemy vessels. Jack gripped the controls, his hands trembling but steady. He wasn't a soldier, but he would do what he had to. The battle had begun. The ancient ship descended like a storm, its weapons blazing. Jack, though inexperienced, found himself guided by the ship's systems, which seemed to anticipate his every move. The enemy vessels, sleek and menacing, turned their attention to the new threat, their weapons firing in unison. The ship's shields absorbed the barrage, but the force of the impact rattled Jack to his core. He clenched his teeth, his hands gripping the controls as he returned fire. The ship's weapons were devastating, each blast tearing through the enemy ships with terrifying precision. But there were too many of them. "We can't take them all on alone." Jack shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the ship's engines. The orb pulsed, and the ship's voice echoed in his mind. "Focus on the command ship. Without it, the others will falter." Jack's eyes scanned the holographic display, quickly identifying the largest enemy vessel. It loomed in the distance, its dark hull bristling with weapons. He steered the ancient ship toward it, dodging enemy fire as he went. The command ship's defenses were formidable. Energy blasts and missiles streaked through the air, forcing Jack to maneuver wildly. The ancient ship's systems compensated for his lack of skill, but it was still a close call. One missile grazed the hull, sending a shudder through the ship and causing alarms to blare. "Shields at 60%, the ship's voice reported. Jack gritted his teeth. "We need to end this now." He brought the ship in close, targeting the command ship's main weapon array. The orb on the console glowed brighter, and the ship's weapons charged with a low, resonant hum. Jack fired, and a beam of pure energy lanced out, striking the command ship's hull. The explosion was blinding. The command ship's hull buckled, then erupted in a cascade of fire and debris. The shockwave rocked the ancient ship, and Jack was thrown from his seat. He hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. When he finally managed to stand, the holographic display showed the enemy fleet in disarray. Without their command ship, the remaining vessels began to retreat, their formations breaking apart. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We did it." The ship's voice was calm but firm. "The battle is not over. The outpost is still in danger." Jack nodded, steering the ship toward the surface. The outpost's defenses were in shambles, and fires raged across its structures. As the ancient ship landed, Jack grabbed his tools and a portable medkit, preparing to help however he could. The airlock hissed open, and Jack stepped out into chaos. The outpost was a sprawling complex of towering spires and interconnected platforms, now littered with debris and the bodies of fallen defenders. Survivors scrambled to put out fires and tend to the wounded. A figure approached him, clad in a battered exosuit. "You're the one who came in that ship?" Jack nodded. "Yeah. I'm here to help." The figure removed their helmet, revealing a weary but determined face. "Then you're just in time. The enemy may have retreated, but they'll be back. And when they return, they'll bring everything they've got." Jack looked around at the devastation, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll be ready." The outpost was in ruins, but its people were resilient. Jack worked alongside the survivors, helping to extinguish fires, repair damaged systems, and tend to the wounded. The ancient ship stood nearby, its hull gleaming faintly in the dim light of the planet's sun. It was a symbol of hope, but also a reminder of the danger they faced. The leader of the outpost, a woman named Mara, approached Jack as he finished helping to set up a makeshift medical station. Her face was streaked with soot, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "We've managed to stabilize the defenses," she said, "but it won't be enough. The enemy will return, and next time, they'll come with more ships, more firepower. We need a plan." Jack nodded, his mind racing. He wasn't a strategist, but he knew they couldn't win through brute force alone. The ancient ship was powerful, but it couldn't take on an entire armada by itself. "What about the archives?" he asked. "The ship said the enemy wants them." "What's in there that's so important?" Mara hesitated, then gestured for him to follow. They made their way to the heart of the outpost, where a massive door sealed off a heavily fortified chamber. Mara entered a code, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a vast room filled with holographic displays and ancient artifacts. "This is the archive," Mara said. "It contains the knowledge of the ones who built your ship. Their history, their technology, their secrets. If the enemy gets their hands on this, they'll be unstoppable." Jack stepped inside, his eyes wide. The room was a treasure trove of information, but it was also a weapon. He turned to Mara. "We can't let them have it. But we can't destroy it either. There has to be another way." Mara nodded. "There is. The archives contain the schematics for a network of hidden defenses scattered across the galaxy. If we can activate them, we might stand a chance." Jack's eyes lit up. "Then let's do it. How do we start?" Mara led him to a central console, where she began inputting commands. The holographic displays lit up, showing a map of the galaxy with dozens of markers. "These are the defense nodes. They're dormant, but if we can send the activation signal, they'll come online. Jack watched as Mara worked, his mind racing. How long will it take? Too long, Mara admitted. The enemy will be here before we can activate even half of them. But if we can buy some time. Jack turned to her, a determined look on his face. Then we'll buy time. I'll take the ship and hold them off as long as I can. Mara stared at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and concern. You'll be outnumbered. You might not make it back. Jack shrugged. I didn't ask for this, but I'm here now. And if this is what it takes to protect the galaxy, then I'll do it. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Thank you. Jack nodded, then turned and ran back to the ancient ship. As he boarded, the orb on the console pulsed, and the ship's voice spoke. You are not alone, it said. Jack smiled faintly. I know. The ship's engines roared to life, and it lifted off, heading straight for the incoming enemy fleet. Jack gripped the controls, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. The final battle was about to begin.